Now, the NYPD is investigating two robberies in Central Park that happened in less than 24 hours.
In just the last few days, there have been multiple violent attacks in the subway system.
This morning, the National Guard will be checking bags after a rash of violent assaults on the nation's largest train system.
How dangerous is New York right now? Are the media reports accurate? Is the Big Apple a virtual hellhole? Today we're going to break down crime stats, see what the city is doing, and give you a balanced look at how safe the streets actually are. We'll start with the most common story I tend to hear from tourists, and it goes something like this. I was scared to travel to New York. I saw all the crazy news stories out there, but when I was actually there, it really wasn't too bad. In fact, I was almost never afraid, except for that one time on the subway when I saw something weird. Now, we're gonna get to some tourist perceptions a little bit later on in the video, but I wanna break down the actual current crime stats right now. And all of these stats are available on the NYPD's website. Compared to last year, murders are down 17%, burglaries down 13%, transit crimes down 6.4%, and we'll get to the subway in a little bit. Shooting victims down 20%, and crime going down almost never makes the news, but it's not all down. Robberies are up 5.4%, felony assaults up 2.9%. In fact, that's up 13.5% over the last 2 years, which is probably the most alarming thing for me. Now, say what you will about certain crimes going up, but undoubtedly, crime is overall down in New York in the last 30+ years. Comparing today versus 2001 and the 90s, crime across the board, 20, 40, 70% lower. That's indisputable. But as a New Yorker, you read about violent crimes occurring, and it makes you feel uneasy. I understand that. The migrant crisis has captured all the headlines recently from the media, especially when it comes to crime. And this is no surprise. With the presidential election looming, this is one of the biggest issues in the United States. There were some high-profile crimes, such as 2 officers getting assaulted near 42nd Street by migrants, and a ring of criminals who were snatching purses off mopeds. Now, as a resident, this stuff is very alarming, and yeah, it's gonna scare you when you read about it. But the New York Times actually released an interesting article on the perception of a migrant crime wave, and I want to read a few passages. Quantifying crimes committed by migrants is nearly impossible because the police are not allowed to ask about a suspect's immigration status. More than 170,000 migrants have arrived in the city since then, and it is difficult to know what crime stats would show had they not come. But as the migrant numbers have increased, the overall crime rate has stayed flat. I think this is a prime example of the media capitalizing on something that is definitely going to generate clicks out of fear. And there is definitely a percentage of the migrant population that is committing some crimes, but it's gotten to the point of viral hysteria where people are asking me, is it even safe to walk around Midtown Manhattan anymore, because that's where the migrant hotels and shelters are. You know what crime you're most likely to see committed by a migrant? One of the most popular jobs that many migrants have been able to get in New York are off the food delivery apps, doing deliveries on mopeds and bikes. And I cannot prove who is a migrant and who is not a migrant at red lights, but I have seen some ridiculous bike riding and moped riding from delivery drivers lately. So you will definitely see reckless driving, reckless cycling by people doing deliveries. That is the crime I think you will most likely see, potentially done by migrants. Outside of migrant crime, the other topic I'm asked about constantly by my viewers is how safe are the subways. And this is one where no matter what I say, it's never gonna change people's opinions. Some people just refuse to ride the subways right now. We have some big updates here, and the NYPD just released this report. Overall crime in the transit system plummeted 23.5% in March, an achievement directly attributable to the 1,000 additional uniformed NYPD officers surged into the network each day. Another 800 NYPD officers were also recently deployed as part of Operation Fair Play, an initiative focused on enforcing fare evasion. All right, so this makes sense to me. The more cops you put underground, the less crimes you are likely going to have. But the Operation Fair Play part, that's been very interesting. I was walking in the Herald Square subway station a couple of weeks ago, and I saw 2 cops surrounding this girl who I believe jumped over the subway turnstile. They're taking that very seriously right now. They're trying to throw the book at people that evade fares in hopes that they keep people who have weapons and have criminal records from going in and committing crimes. At least that's the theory behind it. And while transit crimes are down, not everything is reported to the police. Now, from my own personal perspective as somebody that rides the subway a couple of times a week, I have not seen anything that crazy in a really long time. I was at Atlantic Ave in Brooklyn about a month ago, and somebody started shouting loudly while we were waiting for the train. That startled me. It wasn't that weird of a start to my day, though. I think compared to many other places around the world, many other cities, riding the New York City subway is a much different experience. You've got to be on your toes, and anytime there's some serious violent crime going on, it's going to make the headlines. But statistically speaking, it's not very probable. What's normal in New York isn't normal in a lot of other places around the world, because riding the subways here, being inside the stations, you are going to be exposed to homelessness. You're going to see mental illness, if not on a daily basis, at least on a monthly basis. And that creates a very poor perception of how safe it is. To be honest, the only time I really felt a bit unsafe in the subway was in 2020 and 2021, when there were much less riders than there are today. Call it what you will, but I always feel strength in numbers riding on the subway. Doesn't mean people are gonna jump to your aid if something happens, but you still feel just a tiny bit safer. Even if the city dropped to pre-pandemic crime levels from 2019, they still have to appear like they're doing something. And, you know, we've reported on a lot of these changes in the subway. Most recently, we showed you the anti-shoving barricades, which they were testing out at a couple of subway stations, and I really didn't think they served that much of a purpose other than showing that the city is trying to do something about subway violence. And honestly, I don't think that's going to be the answer to subway assaults. And then a month ago, Governor Hochul got almost 1,000 National Guard to do random bag checks. I believe it was at Grand Central. And to me, that was more of a publicity stunt to show like the governor is trying to stop crime. But putting 1,000 troops underground checking bags is not going to end subway violence in New York. If anything, I heard it was just a hassle to a lot of commuters. But perception is everything right now. And in researching this video, I found out about something that's potentially coming in the next 3 months to New York. You ready for this? Gun sensors.
The NYPD will be testing out freestanding scanners that can spot and track guns.
I have so many questions about this. Like, are the police going to be there every time if somebody brings a gun onto the subway? Are they going to be waiting for you? Will there be ways to game this? Like we showed you those new fare evasion gates. Can people go around it or jump over it or somehow still bring guns onto the subway? They're actually using this right now at Citi Field to see if anyone's bringing guns into a major league stadium. But I wonder, what is the false positive rate on this? There's actually a quote from the mayor here, which I do agree with. We know we have over 4 million riders a day in a reliable system. We know we have approximately 6 felonies a day out of those 4 million riders. But if they don't feel safe, then we're not accomplishing our task. Stats don't matter if people don't believe they're in a safe environment. And he's absolutely right. It doesn't matter if the stats are going down. If people feel nothing is being done, it doesn't matter. There has been an endless amount of articles about shoplifting out of control in New York, CVS's and Duane Reade's having to put a lot of articles behind glass, and you gotta press a buzzer to get somebody to bring it to you. And I even deal with that at my CVS, and it is incredibly annoying. And yes, it's true that shoplifting has run rampant at many big box retail chains, and there have been plenty of closures. They talk about it in this article here, and there's something that I want to highlight from it. And this article hooks you with theft being the main reason that a lot of closures are happening in Flatiron. But in reality, it's also because of a lack of foot traffic, many people shopping online. Heck, even a rep from the vitamin shop said, "We assessed key factors such as lease costs and foot traffic patterns, as well as the availability of other nearby vitamin shop stores at 257 8th Ave and 385 5th Ave. So to get a complete picture of why so many stores are closing around New York, shoplifting certainly could be a part of it, but it's not the only reason. And sometimes you have to look past the headlines of some of these articles to see what's really going on. And I found this announcement about some things that the state is trying to do to curb retail theft. This is interesting stuff. Some of the highlights include allowing prosecutors to combine the value of stolen goods when they file larceny charges. The budget allows retail goods from different stores to be aggregated for the purposes of reaching a higher larceny threshold when stolen under the same criminal scheme. Making it illegal to foster the sale of stolen goods to go after third-party sellers. A person will be found guilty if they use any website or physical location to sell stolen goods. $40.2 million for a dedicated retail theft team within the state police, district attorney's office, and local law enforcement, including 100 New York State police personnel dedicated to fighting organized retail theft. Look, there's some big elections coming up. I think we're gonna be seeing a lot of changes this year with this sort of thing. There's been a lot of noise made about stolen goods being sold on the streets of Queens, migrants being involved with this, prostitution in Jackson Heights. And this is actually one area where I am not going to say this is the media overhyping things. This stuff is actually going on in some parts of Queens. And I know that it's not going to affect most tourists, and unless you're a local, you're not really gonna be face to face with it. But still, illegal markets like that, prostitution and sex trafficking, it's just a bad look for New York. And sadly, this stuff is going on, and it is very true. And I know the police have had some operations trying to shut down these illegal markets, and it just seems like a week or two later, they're back up. Some crime news that a lot of my tourists would definitely be interested in. Central Park has seen a recent increase in robberies. Now, before you check it off your list to visit, keep this in mind. Most of the robberies have occurred in the evening and targeted electronics like phones and expensive headphones. This is an excellent reminder to always be aware of your surroundings in public spaces in New York. Don't leave your phone on the table. And even if you're in Central Park and it's one of the most beautiful places you've ever seen, you're still in New York City. You still have to be aware of your surroundings. And hearing about a few robberies in Central Park just reminds me that, yeah, crime can occur anywhere. You never know. Let's talk about some of the serial assaults that were going on in New York, and in fact were the subject of a lot of TikTok videos from some women who were unfortunately the victim of this.
You guys, I was literally just walking and a man came up and punched me in the face. Oh my God, it hurt so bad. Oh my actual God, I literally just got punched in the face by a homeless man. So I just got punched in the face walking home.
Now, this is very alarming, and the good news is the guy was arrested, and if you're living here long enough, you'll start to see this type of behavior from time to time. Someone on the loose doing something wrong, and it becomes a pattern. Then there's all this media hysteria behind it. It's easy to get caught up in it and think that New York is some out of control place. And maybe it is in some ways, but statistically speaking, your odds of walking outside and getting randomly assaulted are very low. And a lot of these things play off emotion and hearing about crimes and imagining that you could have been the victim of it yourself. And I understand that, but seeing some of these things just get hyped up throughout the media or social media, or even these days, there's YouTube channels of people who don't even live in New York without showing their faces doing anti-New York content. It starts to form this echo chamber that New York is this out of control hellhole. So where does that leave us? Well, here's my advice. take all the news you get about New York with a grain of salt and really read between the lines. A 200% increase in crime could mean there's 6 assaults 1 month versus 3 assaults. Even though crime stats are trending down from the highs of 2020 to 2022, a few crazy stories are gonna sway people's minds who have no intention of visiting here, and you'll see the New York is a hellhole echo chamber all over. Because if you look for problems in a city of 8 million people, you'll be able to find some every day, especially if you know where to look. Is New York City safe? Well, it depends on your definition of safety. Compared to most major US cities, New York has a lower crime rate. Compared to other parts of the United States with much smaller populations where people don't interact as much on a daily basis, crime here is gonna be a lot higher because they don't suffer from the same problems a city of this size suffers from. I leave you with the same common sense advice I always leave you with on videos like this. If you stick to touristy areas, if you don't get drunk and wander around late at night, you really shouldn't run into too many issues. Just let common sense prevail, keep your eyes and ears open and your head on a swivel, and trust your gut if something feels off. New York is not the hellhole that you see on the media, and it's also not this perfect place that many tourists think it is who only visit for a couple of days and, stay in a little bubble. Things are trending in the right direction, and I do think this city is gonna be okay. Now that you know about the current crime situation in New York, if you're curious about some other misconceptions about New York, in this one, we share the biggest lies people keep believing about New York. Watch this next.